Welcome to our training video today. This is Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Training. Today we have as our guest trainer Ava Smith, who is a diversity trainer. Ava has for 19 years been a human resource professional, and in 2005 she launched Ava Smith and Associates, a diversity consulting firm, where she has delivered hundreds of sessions throughout the United States since launching that firm in 2005. I believe she's using her unique style and approach. She's able to capture her audience and bring them through diversity topics with ease. And so today she's going to be teaching us what I call gap knowledge, knowledge that we weren't taught in undergrad or seminary. And her wisdom and years experience is going to serve us well as she goes through and gives us the training in these 6 unique training sessions. Remember, you can pause Ava's video at any time, scroll down, ask a question, make a comment. Of course, if she puts any support documents there, they'll be right in front of you, and you'll be able to ask her questions directly. We'll get those questions to her, and she'll answer back, and you'll have a running dialogue going on between you as the listener and her as the trainer. And so take advantage of that, where you can further your training through interaction with the trainer. And so, Ava, I'm so glad that you're here today, and I trust the Lord's blessing on you as you give this, and that it would do great good to further the cause of Christ.
Thank you, Marshall. I'm really glad to be discussing these types of topics, as I feel that it does help ministries understand where they are in terms of diversity and inclusion. In this particular session, we're going to discuss how the U.S. Census affects your ministry. In the session, our objective today is to understand demographics and the impact on ministries and in our area in general. So every 10 years, the United States conducts a census on its population, and basically it gives us a snapshot of where we are, and the last one that was done was in the year 2010. And I always say that there were some significant findings that came out of it, as well as some things that are not so significant. Very significant under the category of age. Did you know that since 2008, 8,000 people turned 60 on a daily basis? 11,000 people turn 55 every single day. And so that's really profound when you're talking about the makeup of your church and what the membership looks like. The trend where the boomers are high in population that started many years ago in history, and we'll cover some of that when we go over generational diversity, but it still is holding strong in what our population looks like today. So yes, you are going to see a mix in terms of the traditionalists or veterans, as some people call them. You will see Generation X and Generation Ys, but you will primarily still see a strong presence of baby boomers. Under the category of gender, there are some other significant findings. Unlike many, many years ago, there is an increased number of women entering the workforce, and it's actually predicted that within a few years, and here we are in 2013, within a few years, it's actually predicted that there will be an equal number of men and women in the workforce. So you say, you know, how does this affect our ministry? Well, more and more women are becoming educated. More and more women are looking for work-life balance because they are working, but they also want to do volunteer work. They want to participate in their ministries. But because of their higher education and because they're entering the workforce at a higher rate, their demands on time have shifted compared to 20, 30 years ago, where women as a population had a large percentage that stayed at home, and primarily their ministry was their work. When you talk about racial and ethnic minorities, a lot of people zone in on that when it comes to the census. What I want to point out are some of the trends that are happening. Right now as we speak, the ethnic minority group is actually increasing as the Caucasian population is decreasing. That is something that's very significant. When we talk about ethnic minorities, the Hispanics are considered the fastest growing minority group in the U.S. Although there was a 43% increase since 2000, when you look at your own specific region, you can actually still measure what does the growth look like in your particular area, because that is what's going to show up in your ministry. Between 1990 and the year 2000, I am in Greenville, South Carolina, and up the road from me in Mecklenburg County in North Carolina, there was the largest increase in the Hispanic population actually in the nation. They experienced a 735% increase of the Hispanic population. Now, I do want to dispel, some myths here while we're on the topic. And when I say they or them, I am not stereotyping. For the record, I'm just pointing in that we're talking about this particular population. A lot of people assume that that increase, whether it's across the nation or in their particular demographic, that it's attributed to immigration. I want to point out that for some of us, we see an increase in the population of Hispanics due to in-migration, in-migration. And what that means is that, we have certain areas of the U.S. where there's a better cost of living, nicer weather. So Mecklenburg County, for example, in North Carolina, is nestled in a nice area of the U.S., great weather, low housing, opportunities for jobs. And so you might see some of the Hispanic population actually shift from one area of the U.S. to another. Now, that increased awareness may make people feel like this is as a result of immigration, but that is not necessarily the case. When we talk about other ethnic groups, you have the African American population, which makes up about 12.5%, Asian Americans about 4.5%. It's important to realize that 11% of the population is foreign born, and 18% speak non-English at home. Again, this is all significant because if you are trying to diversify your church in terms of bringing in other ethnicities, it kind of helps you understand the demographics as a snapshot for the U.S., helps you drill down to your own specific region, and it allows you to have a starting point to find cultural ways to engage these different ethnic groups so that they are embraced and they feel included in your particular ministry. There are some other findings that came out of the 2010 census. 50%, a little bit over 50% of the population are women, which is pretty interesting. When you want to look at more demographics as it relates to religion, 54% identified themselves as Protestant, 29% Catholic, 2% Jewish, 8% did not designate themselves as anything, and 6% is other. I have no clue what none and other mean, outside of the fact that if you are going to evangelize and reach other people, we know that this is a percentage that is not definitely claiming themselves to be Christians, and this is certainly a population that you may want to zone in on whenever you're doing outreach. It's also interesting to me whenever I'm consulting with churches that their eyebrows raise when I remind them that this also means that there may be people that have come to your ministry that were not Christian when they got there. There are some people that have to actually convert their beliefs. So that is something that you probably want to zone in on and be careful and sensitive to not make the assumption that, everybody that's come to our church is either a believer at all or they're Christian. There are some gray areas in between to consider. 14% of the population report themselves as being disabled. In the professional world, it's more like 17% that are actually disabled that require some type of an accommodation in the workplace. And I mention that because accommodations in the workplace can easily translate into the need for accommodations in ministry. It could be that you do a pulse check in your ministry to see who might be sight impaired. That might drive your decisions on your visuals. Maybe a pulse check on who might be hearing impaired. That might, affect your praise and worship and level of sound and all of those things. believe it or not, this is still a key point when you're talking about diversity in your ministry, because disabilities can be visible, but some disabilities are not visible. But we want to make sure that we're reaching everyone and that they leave understanding the word and not feeling lost during the actual sermon. When we talk about education, you have 82% of the population that actually have their high school diploma and 31% that are college degree. This is important as well. If you have leadership teams that are designing curriculum, whether it's Sunday school or youth ministries, you want to make sure that you have a balance in how you communicate certain topics, because everyone doesn't have an extended vocabulary, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so basic that some of the other people that have higher learning experiences feel like they're not getting enough. I know that that can be a challenge, but these still are demographics that affect how you come across as a ministry and retain your members. When you talk about households, this is very interesting and sad all at the same time. We are now in the position where we're down to almost 25% of our family units representing the traditional household. When I say that, I mean mom and dad married with their own biological children. Again, we are down to around 25%. That speaks a mouthful when it comes to how we're reaching out to single parents, not just single moms, because there are some single dads. You have blended families that sometimes come into a ministry, sometimes with different backgrounds, but you want to embrace them into your church and make sure that everybody's engaged. It could be different demands on time, and you need to be sensitive that some of these households are quite different, and we can't make the assumption that there's dad at home and mom has the liberties to do certain things. So these are just some other general findings that came out of the census. We just talked about what the snapshot looks like right now. However, they have actually done projections that go out as far as 2050. And even as far down as 2050, all of the trends that we just looked at as it relates to racial and ethnic representation in the U.S., they're basically staying the same. If you look, there will still be a high increase of the Hispanic population. The African American population will still stay the same. Asian population will stay the same. But the Caucasian population will continue to decrease. So when we're talking about preparing ourselves for diversity in our ministry, there are many other factors outside of racial and ethnic subjects, but this is something to consider in terms of the face of the nation being translated into our membership. I thank you for listening to me, and I hope that that information was very helpful to you. If you need any more information or if you want any one-on-one training, please feel free to reach out and touch me.
Ava, thank you so much for this. I trust that as you've been taking notes, folks, that you'll take opportunity to reach out through the comment section and look for the third training, which will come right after this one. And thank you, Ava, so much for your help there.